Welcome to the Clemson Dubcast Thursday, October 28th. 2 days from Florida State's visit to Death Valley. And Seminoles fans are geeked about this huge game featuring teams with combined record of 7-7. I'm just joking. Florida State fans should be excited about this opportunity and the progress that's recently been shown under second-year coach Mike Norvell. Who knows, though? Maybe for Clemson, the 8th time will be the charm for an offense that can't get out of its own way. Today at TigerIllustrated.com. Later today, some video analysis and suggestions on perhaps what further could be done to sort of jostle this offense into, I don't know, maybe the neighborhood of 20-plus points. 30? Maybe? My good friends Blake Smith and Brooke Archenhold have been part of the podcast since the beginning, way back in August of 2018. They have an accomplished team of personal injury attorneys at Parham, Smith, and Archenhold based in Greenville. They are Clemson people, and their skillful attorneys have decades of experience in complicated litigation matters, taking a special interest in medical malpractice, nursing home abuse and neglect, car accident cases that have left the individuals involved in serious trouble. For a free consultation at Parham, Smith, and Archenhold, call 864-990-4581 or online at parhamlaw.com. That's PARHAM law.com. Celero Communications, formerly known as Tandem Payment, is a full-service integrated electronic payments provider powered by leading-edge technology. Celero provides a wide array of merchant solutions, simplified payments. They make onboarding, taking payments, maintaining risk management and compliance, and getting support quick and easy. At Celero, they're all about helping you achieve sustainable growth as a business. Taking payments isn't the only thing your business needs. With Celero's solutions, you can manage inventory, sell products and services via social media, schedule staff, track sales, get reports, and much, much more. Find out more about Celero at celerocommerce.com. That's CELERO commerce.com. Another loyal supporter of the Dubcast is Blackacre Law Firm in Greenville, a subsidiary of Parham, Smith, and Archenhold. Blackacre helps South Carolina residents achieve their dreams of home ownership by providing experienced professional representation for real estate closings. Attention to detail is crucial in real estate law. Blackacre is committed to making sure nothing gets by them preparing residential or commercial closings. Blackacre also offers estate planning services for their clients in the Greenville area. Find out more about Blackacre at 864-326-3507. Okay, to our guest, the always hilarious and entertaining David Hale, ESPN.com. All right, joined by David Hale, ESPN.com. Man, you proved you're after my own heart when I texted you and asked if you're ready. And you said, yes, this isn't on camera, right? That's my fear, too, of every podcast I appear on.
Yeah, like not even just like the ones that are going to show video, but just like the fact that I have to exist on video and anyone might see what a train wreck this is behind the scenes.
I love it that here we are in 2021, and there's plenty of, video, of course, is ever present for any medium that you want, and yet there's still a desire for audio only out there.
I never understood the appeal of FaceTime and stuff like that. Like I like being able to call home with my kids and they can see family that doesn't live nearby. Like it's an option that I appreciate, but as a general rule, I don't want people to see me unless I have put a lot of thought and time and effort into that. And you have a
teleprompter?
Yeah. This was also on my resume when I was hired at ESPN. I said, don't put me on camera under any circumstances. The kids today with their videos, I don't get it. I am someone who grew up in an age of the internet where the overwhelming point of everything on the internet was that you could read it in the bathroom, or you could have a screensaver that popped up immediately when your boss walked by. Video is just too out in the open. People see it. I need everything to be kind of behind the scenes.
Well, even when I'm a guest, media wise or whatever, or people call to want to talk about Clemson, I find myself, I'm a pacer. When I'm answering questions, I cannot sit still. My brain works only when I'm walking around my basement or outside or in the garage. And so it's just uncomfortable to sit there and have to stare at this little pin-sized camera and be remotely sensible and coherent. You have the same problem?
Well, I don't like to exercise at all, so I don't move, but I'm still unhappy with the whole. I don't like. I know there were some studies that came out like during like the height of the pandemic that showed how exhausting Zoom was, even like more so than in-person meetings. I don't understand the science behind that, but I believe it because I just cannot stand sitting in front of my computer, looking at a screen and trying to interact with people all day. I do not understand the allure of it.
Just for the record, that was not a workout drop. I wasn't saying I'm pacing on a treadmill.
I'm just saying that's still probably like a half-hour interview for you is probably like a solid 150 more calories than I'm going to burn any given day.
Oh, man. Well, Dave, I guess maybe, I don't know, a month ago, I stumbled onto your I don't know if it's Saturday PM or Sunday AM college football wrap-up column, and I'm not like, blowing smoke. It's the best thing of its kind, and I'm kicking myself for not having made it appointment reading previously. How long have you been doing that particular column?
I kind of black out most weekends in the middle of it. Like 4 years, maybe.
Jeez. Well, Schlabach used to do it.
I genuinely appreciate what you're saying here. First of all, so let me say that up front. That I assume my check is cleared, and I appreciate the kind words. Yes. So Schlabach used to do it. Our friend Edward Ashoff did it for a little while. I think a few other people did. This column was viewed as, I believe, a form of punishment at ESPN.com. It is very, very stressful, as you might imagine, trying to write effectively on deadline on Saturday night about literally every game that was played on a Saturday. And there was no well-formed idea for what it should be. I think everybody kind of did some version of it, back in the day when like Bruce Feldman and Pat Forty were with ESPN. I think they had some version that I'm not sure if it ran Saturday night, but it was sort of like the all-encompassing wrap-up. And I assume, though this is well out of my pay scale, is that it is sponsored content that they make money off of. So it is something that matters to the suits, and none of the people like myself who we're college football artists, if you will, understood what in the hell to do with it. And so it was, I believe, punishment for a while that whoever got stuck doing this had clearly done something to anger someone higher up the food chain at ESPN. And that is how it fell into my lap around 4 years ago. I remember one of the editors taking me aside at a big team corporate meeting in Bristol and saying, like, "Hey, I got a good thing for you to do this year." I was like, "No!" And that first year, I remember Edward texting me almost every week saying, "Thank God you're doing this now instead of me." So anyway, that's the abridged history of that column.
All right. So previous to that, your routine consisted of traveling mostly, right? Coming to Clemson a good bit.
Yeah.
On Saturdays.
Yeah, and I mean, I be honest with you, this is sort of the other downside to this is like, I mean, downside or upside. There's plenty of Saturdays I don't miss being like at, Clemson, South Carolina State, but I do feel like I end up not traveling on a whole lot of Saturdays anymore. But this is honestly like, I don't know if you feel this way too. I don't know what the numbers look like in terms of what you do, but the way ESPN tends to view it, particularly because we're doing stuff on a national scope, that our Saturday coverage, just like the consumption is so immediate and then gone, because there's other stuff that has happened that I think they've just largely decided like attending games is almost like secondary to what is going to get real engagement, which is an odd thing. I mean, the numbers back it up. It makes sense to me, but I miss kind of being around people.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was, that's what I used to do is I'd go and sit in the press box. So I guess nobody's really having like a good face-to-face press box experience very often anymore the last couple of years. So I dragged everyone down to my level with COVID is essentially what happened.
So I remember when being a newspaper guy, it took me a while to understand that, wait a minute, that the game coverage is not the biggest thing that I do of the week. Like, when you're with a newspaper and you're covering a game, hopefully with somebody helping you, you're doing a game story, sidebar, notes column, grades, and all this other stuff. And then when I joined the internet world, it was a gradual, hey, Larry, the people really don't subscribe for what you write about a game. So not that it's not important, not that you're not still writing about it, but the much more important stuff is August camp coverage, when everybody has spent the entire off season not hearing anything, and all of a sudden you have these shiny new toys, and everybody wants to know how they look. And then during the season, it's during the week when you're providing insight about whatever injuries or things like that, stuff that's also happening sort of behind closed doors. Everybody watches the game, and so it is interesting to see. I mean, obviously, y'all's metrics and models, financial models, are different from a subscription-based venture, but it's still interesting to hear ESPN sort of coming around to that as well, that realization of, hey, it's a communal thing. Everybody's watching the games anyway, and so you don't necessarily need to spend thousands and thousands of dollars actually being there, especially now when almost all these press conferences are still on Zoom anyway. You can still participate.
Yeah, and this is what this took me a while to kind of wrap my head around when I first started working at ESPN, because I came from newspapers. I covered beats, and the goal was to write as much content as you could every day. And I don't know that was bad. I mean, I had some success doing that, I guess. But when I realized the goal is to write stuff that is different and deeper and better, it was a very liberating experience. And I think game stories sort of fit into that. And look, I covered Major League Baseball for years and was writing 162 game stories on deadline most nights anyway. I got very good at it. And I appreciate it as an art form, but it is not the thing that moves the needle significantly. And it is a sort of a liberating thing to say, I don't need to write about everything that happens that everybody else is also writing about. I can use my time differently. I think it is, without question, the biggest advantage I have working at a place like ESPN, where we're catering to a markedly different audience than the local newspaper or a site like yours that is in the weeds in terms of what college football at Clemson is. And so that's sort of, I think, has given me a little bit different perspective on what really drives engagement, what fans want to hear about and learn about, and what is just sort of I don't know, the things you do because we've always done them. And again, it's not, somebody's got to do those things. If everybody took the approach of, well, everybody does a game story, so we're not going to invest in that, then there'd be no game story. Somebody has to do them, and I'm glad that they do. But it always does kind of make me scratch my head about how much sort of media is not really well diversified. It's if you looked at it from simply a sharing of information business, it's not particularly efficient. We have 30 people writing some version of the same thing most days.
Yeah, and it's interesting because not long ago, just a few years ago, I remember, when Clemson was obviously the big sensation for years running, a lot of the national guys would come and write about the big games, and that was always one of the coolest things for me. The next day was I want to see what Andy Staples wrote, for Sports Illustrated, or whoever, mainly Staples, because he's such a good, he had such a way of going deep into each situation he was parachuting into and providing such insight and depth. But now you look at Staples, he's now with The Athletic. I think what he does most of the time is I think he does write some on Saturdays, but he's not traveling every Saturday. And they do a podcast at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And so, that has sort of been flipped as well. I mean, I know there are still national guys out there going to games, like Pete Thamel does a great job, and some others. But it's really changed a ton just from that perspective of the national guys going around and providing, working deep into the night and the morning, providing something, a long, like 1,200 word, deeply insightful column with a lot of good color.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think there's value in sort of every part of the puzzle. If you kind of look at it from a fan's perspective as sort of a mosaic of information that's out there, the worst thing you can do, in my opinion, is effectively make something that is, make vanilla ice cream in an industry that is making a lot of vanilla ice cream. That's not particularly interesting to anybody, and it's easily repeatable and found elsewhere. But I don't think you have to necessarily do it the way that Andy does or Pete does or I do or you do. I'm glad that everybody is sort of doing it their own way because it makes for better content. It's always, even if you just took a Saturday story, what you're going to write as somebody who is on the ground with Clemson daily is going to look different and read differently than what Andy is doing as sort of a coming in from that 10,000 foot view and seeing how that game fits into the larger scope of college football nationally or whatever. And I think those things both have value and both provide, a unique reader experience. And that's sort of, to get back to sort of where we started on this, sort of the approach that I tried to take with this column is like, if we're going to do this big Saturday wrap-up thing that, everybody does some version of, whether it comes out on Saturday or Sunday or Monday or whatever, like I want mine to be as different from everybody else's as possible. And that doesn't mean like you're going to come away from it feeling very informed necessarily, but I want you to know that you read something there that you're not going to read anywhere else. And I hope that is a part of what is your overall media diet on these types of things. Like, I'm not trying to be, I think too many people try to be everything to everyone, and that is not a recipe for success. I think know your voice, know who you are, know what your audience wants, and deliver that.
So as an entry into your process on Saturdays, maybe provide some comparison, like my day, which is a lot easier, is what I'm trying to say. So like a 3:30 game for me, wake up, have a leisurely morning, maybe do something with the family, roll into the game around, 2 o'clock, watch the warm-ups, watch game, go to press conference, and Dabo's press conferences are so long after the game that I'm able to basically write my entire column before that even starts, which is a good thing, I guess. Finish Dabo's 35-minute press conference. I'm not complaining. It's great. And then go home, have a beer, watch some more football, go to somebody's tailgate, have a beer, watch some football, not really care. I don't have to monitor anything at all, really. And so the point is, for me and for a lot of others, up until an hour and a half before the game, and then I guess and then 2.5, 3 hours after the game, after that point, Saturdays are fun and pressure free. Whereas I want to construct your Saturday, but to give people an idea of how hard that is, because I forwarded your most recent college football wrap up to a couple of friends. We have a thread where we're grumpy old grammarians, I guess, and we're always pointing out the worst parts of sports writing and also things that announcers say and all the cliches and wailing and moaning about how bad things are. And I sent them this column and I said, y'all, there's a beacon, like there's still good writing. And this is an example. And one of the guys read it and he said, that was tremendous. He said, but surely he has to have some people helping him at ESPN put all that together. And I'm like, no, he doesn't. I think he does that all himself. And so anyway, I say that to say, can just give your sort of TikTok of your typical Saturday, which I guess starts right at noon, and then how do you manage that plus the sensory overload of Twitter, managing your time, compartmentalizing, and I mean, I just can't. My brain is not wired to be able to think clearly over a 12-hour stretch enough to be able to write something coherent after the typical madness of a college football Saturday.
Yeah, my brain is not wired that way either. And I wish I could remember the exact quote, but I remember this was when I was first wanting to get into journalism, and back when Simmons was writing for Page 2 on ESPN, and he had done some sort of I don't know what the story was, but he posted a quote that he said was one of his favorite quotes, and I have absolutely no recollection of who it was from, but the quote was something to the effect of, "The act of writing is waking up every morning convinced you're not going to be able to do it anymore."
Yeah.
You're going to utterly, it's a miracle that you got the last one done and you have no idea how the next one is going to happen. And I didn't appreciate that at the time, and I wish I could go back and find that specific quote now, because I'm not sure I've ever, anything has ever resonated so well with me. I have no idea how this happens. It just does. It is a tribute in many ways to what a deadline can force you into doing. I mean, the sensory overload thing is really the biggest thing. So I feel like this is going to be boring, but
nope,
I get up, I play with my kids for a while, and then I go and tune into probably the last hour of game day to kind of get in the mood for some college football. The first, the early games, the noon kickoffs, I just am sort of taking notes as things go along. Did something funny happen? Did something interesting happen? I spend a lot of time on Twitter because you can find sort of the funny stuff that you miss from other games. And that's sort of just let's get a foundation here. And sometimes enough weird stuff will come out of those games that you end up with something really substantive to write about. The Illinois Penn State game last week was just a gift from the football gods to say, here's a thing that happened at noon. I believe it wrapped up somewhere around 9:30 p.m. after 9 overtimes. But this is a thing that it really was perfect for what I want to do, because it was substantive, hilarious, and utterly meaningless in the big picture of things. So it was okay for me to only joke about the entire thing without actually considering the fact that there was real information that should be conveyed. I needed to convey no information. I just needed to make fun of that game. That's really my wheelhouse. So I felt very good about that. Most Saturdays I have an idea of 2 or 3 games that are impactful or interesting, or at least a bigger game involving a team that maybe I haven't written about very much yet. And so those are sort of my focal points going in. And then I'm kind of looking for a way to sort of sew them together a little bit. So, it's sort of this past week, I wrote a little bit about the Oklahoma and Kansas game because I hadn't written a ton about Oklahoma. And it was just sort of indicative to me of what a lot of this season has been, in which I think Georgia's really good, but even that, it's mostly their defense is really, really good. And somehow a man named Stetson Bennett is controlling their offense and they're still winning. But all the rest of the teams feel very sort of flawed in a way that we're not used to potential national championships looking. And Oklahoma's performance against Kansas was very reminiscent of that idea. And so I'm just kind of, that thought sort of occurred to me, and I was like, okay, I can lead this column with a story about Oklahoma, but also have it as a bigger idea of maybe we need to lower our expectations for what greatness is this year among teams. And then the rest of it is just sort of watching for entertaining things and seeing if there's a way that I can make a joke about it. And I wish to say, I wish I could tell you most of these jokes are good. They're mostly lowest common denominator, easy, making fun of Jim Harbaugh's pants type of thing. And I hope to squeeze a little bit of interesting info, trivia, data, whatever in there where I can. And again, so anyway, I'm sort of writing little parts of this throughout the day. I usually around 8:30 or so like halftime of the 7:00 kickoffs, we'll really sit down and say, all right, I got to write my lead on this now and put some time into that. And then maybe add a few things. The poor Pac-12, like I mean, it's probably for the best because the Pac-12 probably shouldn't want attention put onto it at this point. But like I end up missing half of that because I'm so damn exhausted by the end of it. I have no idea how it all comes together. It just manages to coalesce at the end of the day. Usually also you brought up an interesting point. And this is where our Saturdays, the Venn diagram of our Saturdays has some overlap. Is round about 8:00 is when I crack my first beer, and that really allows the process to begin. And I have no idea what happens after that.
What is the deadline?
So usually the goal is to kind of have it in our copy desk's hands to edit by like 11:30, like whenever the last like big game ends. So the worst part is like if you're writing about like the A&M Alabama game a couple weeks ago. That was not a game I was really expecting to be the most important game of the day, and B, it was the latest kickoff of the big games. So that was rewriting all of this.
Wow.
Effectively, like writing it at 11:30 to try and have it to the copy desk by midnight, and that's sort of a hassle. But usually, I think it posts probably between midnight and 1 a.m. depending on how things are going. And all of it's terrible. Nobody wants to do this job. I did, before this, I was responsible for our bowl projections for a couple of years, maybe 1 year. And that also sucked because you'd have to stay up until like 2:30 in the morning to see like if Hawaii was going to win and be bowl eligible or something like that. So it's all downside. There's no upside to any of this is what I'm getting at.
Well, so you basically, when the most momentous event happens in the last, late night, you have to basically tear a lot of your stuff up, or do you mainly have to rearrange and reprioritize, I guess?
A little of both. I try to aim more for the latter. So when I used to cover baseball, like the worst possible thing was an extra innings game because you'd be rewriting a story that was, you'd be pretty much having to hit send on a story as soon as the last pitch was made. And so you'd be rewriting and you would have written like 6 different versions of what was going to happen based on the score changes and stuff like that. So it's a little bit of like you go back and you see what you can salvage from before and kind of stitch it together like Frankenstein's monster at the end of the day. But, a little bit of it is sort of like, here's the thing too. I'm going to complain about all this because it is stressful, but it's also like probably the thing that I need because I have a story that's out today on Georgia's Jordan Davis that I spent like all day yesterday, 2 days ago, just like slaving over every word because I had some time to actually sit down and think about what I was writing. The less time I have, the less I think about it. And I think that's almost better for me. Like I get in my head too much when I'm writing like a big feature. And sometimes like a deadline is the one thing you need to just say, well, I don't know if this is any good, but it's going to be done. And that's important.
Is the fear that you talked about waking up every morning and I guess I would say I don't know if humility is the right word, self-loathing maybe better. Could you argue that's an essential ingredient to producing really good stuff, to never feeling like you're any good?
This is fascinating, and I feel like we could do like an entire podcast just on this discussion. I'm so bad at like retaining information. I have 2 small children, so my brain is just like oatmeal now. But I was talking to somebody, I don't know, years ago who said like everyone is motivated by one of 2 things, either a quest to achieve something great or a fear of failing. And both can be very good recipes to success, and it sort of depends on what your personality is and how you respond to things. I am definitively a fear of failure person, and like part of it is exactly like the self-loathing pessimist, whatever, I guess. But like I just sort of assume greatness is probably out of my wheelhouse anyway. My biggest thing is like don't embarrass yourself, and that I think is a very good motivating factor to keep working harder and trying harder because I genuinely am not sure that like I don't care whatever I have done, good or bad, in the past 15 years of my career. It is effectively out the window today, and I'm worried that tomorrow I will not do anything good again. And that is what motivates me. I think there are plenty of people, though, who are like, well, I did this awesome, and I got to beat that record the next time. And it's this quest to keep trying to get better. And that's probably good, too. But that's just definitely not how I approach things.
Yeah, I think I identify with your sort of mentality or insecurity. Like there are those great moments, I guess, like if you get a scoop or something, or you tell this great story that nobody is told, but that lasts like a day. Right. And then there's just, like, for me at least, 95% of my professional existence is this restlessness of what am I not getting, or there's something out there that I should be doing, or man, this story's not any good. Anyway, I think it's, and that probably applies to artists, musicians, whatever. That thread probably weaves itself around so many different, I guess, creative endeavors.
I mean, you look at like the history of people who work in creative outlets and the amount of like drug addiction and alcohol and misery. Like, it's not entirely surprising. And it is like I would probably feel like this even if I was like an accountant. Like, this is probably still how I would feel, maybe to a lesser degree, because my accounting work isn't like put out on a website for anyone in the world to go view. But I think it's just like hardwired into who I am. And I do think maybe, like, God knows I have spent enough time in press boxes to think like, I hope I'm an outlier in this room sometimes. But I think like people who are wired that way tend to be drawn to certain things too. And it is one of the great sort of paradoxes that people who lack a lot of self-esteem and confidence are somehow drawn to these avenues of work in which they are constantly being judged by people who don't know them at all. Like, what a random, horrible existence. But I think that there's something in it. And you know what? It is a little bit like a drug, in that like you live for that fleeting moment when people tell you you're good enough, and then literally it's gone 90 seconds later, and you're like, God, I'm not good enough anymore, and you got to start it all over again.
And on top of that, you spend, or at least I, over the summer, it's like on the eve of August camp, it's like, oh my God, it's about to start again, and I'm about to, have to bust my ass for however many months, and I'm not going to have any weekends off, and here we go again. But invariably, I find myself happiest when I'm working hard, and there's that structure versus you look for, you spend this, or I spend the spring, winter and spring looking forward. Oh my gosh, summer's coming and free time and all this other stuff. But after like a week, I'm like, I'm not miserable, but just like sort of lost. Like, what am I doing here? I'm kind of, I don't know what to do with myself, I guess, when they're with idle time. And so it just goes to show, I guess it's another example of how the paradox that you talk about, how,
I like that this podcast has devolved into sort of us psychoanalyzing each other. And, but this is literally something I have been sort of grappling with lately of trying to get better about, is sort of compartmentalizing the whole thing, because I do this, like, that's exactly how like when I don't have something going on, I'm stressed about what the next thing is. Or if I have decided like, I'm not going to work on this today, I need some time. Yeah. I'm just stressed about the fact that I'm not working on it. Yeah. And so I need to be better about like actually doing the thing that I'm supposed to do so that it's done and I can set it aside, or compartmentalizing it better. And when I'm not doing it, actually focus and find joy in other things. Anyway, this has become like a scared straight program for anybody who might want to get into this profession. If you're an aspiring journalist, let me tell you, get out now and go do something that you won't end up talking to your buddy on a podcast
about. Run for the hills.
10 years. Yeah.
All right. The last thing on the column, what I love about it is, there are funny people who write, columns full of one-liners. But what I love about yours is that your one-liners aren't just one-liners. They also sort of nail the essence of something. And one passage in your most recent one was about Wake Forest. And you said, meanwhile, Wake Forest is 7-0 for just the second time in program history after hanging 70 on Army, despite just 17 minutes and 17 seconds of possession time. That is absolutely nuts, by the way. Yeah. That's a point every 14 seconds, a level of cold, cruel efficiency usually reserved for tax audits. Sure, the Wake defense also gave up 56 points, turning the box score into something more like a Cheesecake Factory menu. But this is 2021, and everyone has flaws. At least Wake's flaws are fun. Like, that's not just a joke or a series of jokes. It also really drills down on the essence of this season, whether it's Clemson, whose flaws are not fun, and a number of other schools out there.
Yeah, I grew up, I think, like this sounds really, I don't know, self-indulgent, but like my comedy influences, if I were to be a comedian, were like, I grew up with Letterman and like late 80s, early 90s Saturday Night Live. And what I always appreciated or came to appreciate about the way like Dana Carvey, Mike Myers, Letterman, all those guys approached joke telling was that it really wasn't about the joke. It was about finding like a truth in something that sort of grazed up against reality, but wasn't really reality. It was sort of this, you look at like any Dana Carvey impersonation and it's sort of like you see the person he's impersonating in him, but it's this hilariously overwrought version of it. Which, by the way, if you look up, it drives me crazy on Saturday Night Live now. Like, they've just gone through this series of terrible Biden impersonations, and Dana Carvey will go on Colbert every now and again, and he absolutely nails Biden. It's 100% perfect. Like the way he like lists off there. Well, number one is this, and then B, he got that. It's so perfect. And anyway, I think that's what I haven't given it enough thought, but like the way you explain that, that's sort of what I think. That's just what I do instinctively. Is like, what is the kernel of truth here, and then how can I turn that kernel of truth into something funny? Yeah. And that's sort of the way that I have tried to approach writing it.
All right, to Clemson, a lot to dissect, inspect. Have you heard Dabo's the sermon he gave? I guess it was yesterday when he was on with the flagship station here, the Roar, for a benefit for Tigers for Tatas. But he closed it with a mic drop, 8-minute sort of call to arms, or maybe a sermon to the fans to sort of stay the course and believe. Have you managed to listen to that?
I have not listened to it yet.
Well, I'll tell you what we're going to do if it's cool with you. I'm going to play it right now, and you can interrupt me if you like. Maybe we can, say, okay, that's interesting, or whatever. You can laugh, whatever you want to do. But does that sound okay?
Let's do it.
Okay, here we go. This was at the Bojangles yesterday. DJ,
oh, yeah, I saw his video a little bit on Twitter with his Bojangles cup, and I thought he was infringing on Jeff Collins' copyrighted image of carrying around a food chain beverage cup.
What about DJ's copyrighted image? He's a Bo guy too, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Right. I like it. NIL's adding competition here.
All right, feel free to interject, and I can hit pause as this goes along. But here we go.
Okay. All right.
Can you hear that, David?
I can.
Okay. All right, here we go.
All right.
Keep some faith. All right. And I want to challenge everyone to really kind of check their perspective. If you don't believe in this coaching staff, in this team, and the culture that we have at Clemson, after what everybody has lived through over the last whatever, then you probably really didn't believe in the first place. All right, and we have a great group of young men that fight their butt off, and we've stunk on offense this year. There's no question about that, and it's not, and we know, we haven't forgotten football. We know the issues, all right? And we're going to get better, and we're getting better. And as bad as we've been, we're still a gnat's hair from being undefeated, all right? And that's a reality. But here's the other thing. We got a great group of young people that are learning a lot of great lessons. And hopefully, if not, and listen, we got a long way to go this year. And we're going to go fight our butt off as a staff and as a team to finish the best possible way we can. But if nothing else comes from this, I hope that it's a reset and an appreciation of how hard it is to win. It is not easy to win. And I think people, everybody can just kind of get numb and take it for granted. All right, 10-plus win seasons in a row is the third longest streak in the history of college football. History. You know why? Because it's hard to win, especially when consistently. We may not make
this is such a good point that he's making here, and it's a thing that like I try to talk about a lot. My buddy Dave Wilson, who writes for ESPN, we were literally last week just like having this same conversation that it is the most cliched thing ever to say it is hard to win, and everyone will say like, well, yeah, but when you go and play, Austin Peay, it's not hard to win. It is still hard to win. It is like people don't appreciate how narrow the gap is. And this is sort of like, it's a double-edged sword because it annoys me a little bit when Dabo is like, there are 8 plays in that game. 8 plays go different, we win. And I'm like, yeah, in almost every game in college football, you change 8 plays and the outcome is different. In fact, in the ACC this year, I looked this up earlier this week, I think 57% of conference games in the ACC this year have been decided by a touchdown or less. And so it's not 8 plays. It's 1, 2, maybe 3 plays effectively decide almost every game. And I think it's oversold how easy it is to move that needle when you're losing and you're just saying, we're just a few plays away. Everybody's a few plays away. But what doesn't get talked about enough is that when you're winning, you don't realize how easy it is to have screwed up those few plays and it goes the other direction. And I think, this is, I guess, a little bit of like what I was saying about writing about Oklahoma this week. We have been conditioned. I mean, really, think about the last 3 national championship teams. So Clemson, LSU, Alabama. At the end of that, there was a reasonable, justifiable, well-argued case to be made for each of them as the best team to have ever played college football over the course of a season. It's insane that is the world we're living in right now. And to hold that standard to anyone else and assume not just that that's the standard, but that it's a continually replicable standard is insane. It doesn't happen like that. He is not wrong. It is hard to win. And the fact that Nick Saban has somehow sold his soul to the devil at a crossroads in northern Alabama to win at this level, I don't know how he does it. He is a damn magician. But, the fact that Clemson is at this point, everyone gets to this point at some point because sometimes if you have the luck go with you for so long, it's all going to go against you at one point. And 3 or 4 plays really does make a difference. So I'm glad he says this. And I think, to critique him a little bit, he will twist that to make his point either way, but it's not wrong.
2 things. I got news for you too. They're also 8 plays away from 1-6.
Right. Yes.
Like legitimately. But I think he's talking to his team, just as Nick Saban does. He's not going to just say. I mean, he has said we stink, and that's I've never heard him say that during a season ever.
Yeah.
Even in 2010, even in 2014 when they weren't any good on offense. So that's something that he is being transparent to that extent. I'll also say, to your point on how hard it is to win, at 95% of the schools out there, I don't know, maybe less than that, a 4-3 record is like, man, we're struggling this year and this is tough. Now, I mean, if you do it every year, then you're going to be calling for major change. But this 4-3 record for Clemson is startling only solely because of a 79-7 record before that preceded it. So it's like, And these same coaches.
Look at the team Clemson's playing this week. They're 3-4, and they are thrilled to death right now.
Football season is grilling season, and Jack Oliver's Pool Spa and Patio is South Carolina's premier source for the Big Three: Weber, Traeger, and Big Green Egg Grills. Blackstone Griddles, too. I'm Jack Oliver. Grill all your tailgate favorites to perfection with a premium gas, charcoal, or pellet grill, then top it all off with something sizzling from your Blackstone Griddle. For grills, griddles, patio furniture, hot tubs, and saunas, shop in store or online at Jack Oliver's Pool Spa and Patio, Forest Drive in Columbia, and jackoliverpools.com.
Want to share a quick word about Founders Federal Credit Union? If you've been to a sporting event in Clemson, you've probably heard about Founders already. They are the official credit union partner of the Clemson Tigers. In addition to that, all Clemson faculty, staff, and students are eligible for membership as well as IPTAY members. Matt Gross is a proud Clemson alum and the vice president for the Clemson market for Founders Federal Credit Union. Matt's office is located beside the Walmart Neighborhood Market on Old Greenville Highway in Clemson. For more information, go to foundersfcu.com. If you're in the Eastern Midlands and PD area and you're in any way interested in buying and selling a home, commercial property, land, need to consider reaching out to Uptown Realty. They're based out of Sumter and run by a friend of mine, Patrick Enzer, big Clemson guy, used to cover the Tigers in a newspaper capacity, longtime supporter of Tiger Illustrated, longtime listener to the Dubcast. The home buying process should be an enjoyable experience, so let Patrick and his staff do all the heavy lifting. All you got to do is pick up the phone and call 803-774-0435 or go to uptownrealtysc.com. When you're ready for a complete renovation in your home or business, open the door to more with Harris Home and Harris Commercial. Their local experienced team will totally transform any room space, from beautiful floor coverings to construction to finished details. Harris handles every step of your renovation process, whether it's a kitchen or living room or an industrial or educational setting, like some of the positively stunning work they've done at Clemson University. Go to discoverharris.com and experience a total renovation transformation from Harris Home and Harris Commercial. All right, we can continue, and feel free to interrupt again.
Nobody's ever done it. Not Alabama, not anybody. You know why? Because it's hard to do that. It's really, really hard. We got 6 wins in the playoffs. Alabama has 8. We've beaten the best of the best on the biggest stage. Tony Elliott has not forgotten football. He's one of the smartest, brightest people on the planet. All right? And when I got this job, Clemson was so friggin' divided. I mean, pathetically divided. All right? And this is not a time for division. This is a time to roll your freaking sleeves up and get behind this team and get behind this staff and have some daggum faith and some trust. All right? I'm the same guy that's been a part of 2 national championships. Tony Elliott's the same guy that in 3 national championships of Alabama has won 2 of them, and the one we lost was 45-40 with almost 600 yards. So we haven't forgotten football, you know, but football can be a very challenging thing at times. You know, you have development, you have maturity, you have injuries, you have limitations from time to time for different reasons, all right? Nobody's entitled to win. Nobody's entitled to that. You have to earn that. And I hope that there can be a reset and an appreciation for how hard it is to win, and especially win consistently, right? Because it's not easy. It's not. But I can guarantee you this, Clemson ain't going anywhere. This is what a journey it's been the last 13 years. I mean, what an unbelievable journey. In 2009, there wasn't 3 people outside of my wife and my mom and Kool-Aid Jim, wherever he is, that thought we would go on a run like we've been on the last 13 years. You know, over these 13 years, we've had some challenging moments. You know, I remember in 2010, y'all remember we were, 6-6? And I mean, y'all remember Chandler Catanzaro? Y'all remember he couldn't make a kick? And everybody's, man, why do you keep running that guy out there? Well, because he's unbelievable in practice. You know, and I remember, you know, I talked to him, he was, you know, because I said, I got to go sign a kicker. I love you, and I still believe in you, but I got to go get a kicker. Because I can't go for another year like this. I said, man, if you can just ever figure out how to get it from the practice. Well, he left here as the most accurate kicker we've ever had and the points leader. And that's what's going to happen with DJ Uyunglele. All right, I'm just telling you right now. Okay, DJ is going to be an unbelievable quarterback. He's going to be a great quarterback. And we got to be better around him. And there's a lot of things, and it's been a weird year, but we got a lot of fight, man. We got 5 weeks to go be the very best we can be. All right? And this is just like when we were 2-3 in 09, and we played for the championship. 1-2 in 14, and we went 10-3 and won 40-6 against Oklahoma. All right? Gave up 70 in the Orange Bowl in 2011. Boy, that stunk. We come back the next year and beat LSU with 2 seconds on the clock, and that same kicker that missed that game-winning kick against Auburn in the overtime down there in 10, he makes that kick. You know why? Because we kept the faith, and we kept working, and we didn't flinch because of all the bull crap. All right? And so this is the time where everybody needs to take a deep freaking breath, okay? And understand who we are and quit listening and worrying about what other people say. All right? We are Clemson. All right? We are Clemson. And this is one season in the midst of an unbelievable journey. And we got a long way to go. We got a long way to go. We got a long way to go this year, but you best believe Clemson ain't going nowhere. All right? And we're going to keep doing it the Clemson way, building great men through this game of football. All right? That's what we're going to do, and we're going to win at the highest level as consistently as anybody's ever won in college football. That's what we've done, and that's what we're going to keep doing. So quit worrying about what somebody says who don't know anything about who we are as people or who we are as a program, and certainly don't know who these kids are. We have a great group of young men that fight every day, and there's nobody that hurts more than this staff, that where we are. But you know what? How about let's give the opponents some credit too? You know, and the media's a part of this, because Coach Saban talks about rat poison. Well, all people hear and read is that Clemson's just going to roll everybody. You're just going to roll everybody. Oh, they're going to play Georgia. Well, they'll either be 11-1 or 12-0. That's the only person playing. You know what? Everybody else hears that too. And everybody's got coaches and everybody's got players. And it's not easy to win. And you don't just come to Clemson and go win. You don't just show up and win. Right? And so, man, there's a lot of positives that are going to come from this season. There's a lot of positives, a lot of great things. Okay, so all I can tell you is I'm 51 and I'm just getting going. I got a long way to go in college football. A long way to go. And I'm a better coach today, and our staff's a better staff than we were back in 09. And this roster and the culture that we have and the track record is undeniable. All right? So I just want to say that.
You know what would be great, Larry, is to and maybe when you put this out you can do this. Go back through, and every time he uses like freaking or something like that, like bleep it, like as if he was actually cursing.
Oh my god. What a great idea. He literally you can't see it, but I can because it was on video. He pulls his headset off and literally drops the mic on the table and walks off. So what's your general sort of reaction to that?
So this to me, I mean, it's such a perfect encapsulation of sort of what makes Dabo great and what makes Dabo frustrating, right? So like on one hand, first of all, I think a lot of what he's saying right there, as much as he's directing those comments to the fan base, he's just as you said, he's talking to his team. He wants those guys to know that he's out there fighting for them. And I think that is absolutely what has to happen. That's exactly what a coach should be doing in this situation. And he's not wrong about most of what he says. The people who want to can Tony Elliott, I'm just like, are you people crazy? This guy has coached you to 2 national championships as an offensive coordinator. Like, I'm talking to other coaches around the country, around the league, and trying to get feedback on, like, because I'm an idiot. I don't know what's wrong with Clemson. I'm trying to ask other smart people who have no reason to lie to me. And all of them say, Tony Elliott's a hell of a good coach. If Tony Elliott was coaching, North Carolina's offense right now, they'd probably be undefeated. Like, this is all people who are getting angry are reactionary. And Dabo's not wrong about that. I've been trying to tell Miami fans this too. And I think it's probably, tilting at windmills, because my guess is that it's going to be almost impossible for Manny Diaz not to get fired. But if you have a coaching staff that are doing the right things but not getting the right results, the missing ingredient is probably just time. Like, give it another year and the results will come. And so the question that should be being asked about Clemson is, are they doing the right things and just not getting the right results? Because that's bound to happen, as we said, every now and again. My argument would be that the sport of college football is so quickly evolving and always evolving that there is a thin line between protecting the culture and your foundation and your philosophy and just being obtuse to new realities and refusing to adjust. And I don't know exactly what side of that line Dabo is really on. And I think, to me, that's the most fascinating question about what's happening at Clemson or what the future might be. Because Dabo is steadfast in who he is and how he's going to do things. And he doesn't like being questioned about them, as you and I both know. And most of the time he's right. I mean, his entire career is based off of doing things people told him he couldn't do and doing it his way. So how do you tell him, well, the way you're doing it now, though, after you've been to the playoffs 6 years in a row, now it's wrong and you should listen to us? I totally get where he's coming from. But reality is that this offense needed help from the transfer portal, from somewhere. There's a changing landscape, whether you like NIL or not. It is here, and you need to adapt to it, adjust to it. And again, look, comparing anything to Saban is a problem because there is only one Nick Saban. But the biggest thing that Nick Saban did to stab every other coach in America in the back is that he evolved. There was no let's catch up to Nick Saban, or the game and time catch up to Nick Saban. Saban, unlike pretty much everyone else who has ever existed in that profession, has stayed ahead of time and stayed ahead of the game and the changes. He is a master at it. But yet what is core and deliberate and philosophical about how Nick Saban wants to build a program at Alabama hasn't changed. That's a very difficult balance to achieve. And I don't know how to do it, certainly. So I certainly don't know how to tell Dabo to do it. But I'm saying that I don't know that Dabo can be 2015 Dabo and still be going to the playoff in 2025. And that 2021 might represent a point in which he has to evaluate what is working and what is not. And I don't think that means a ton of coaching staff changes, but I do think it means a little less maybe circle the wagons and a little more let's be open to, what is working other places, and is that something that can fit within the construct of what we want our culture and our system to look like.
You mentioned Saban, and the addition of Jamison Williams is fascinating from Ohio State for a number of reasons. Jamison Williams wasn't a big standout for them at Ohio State. He showed some potential, obviously. I mean, he caught a big touchdown pass against Clemson in the Sugar Bowl. But Alabama, even though it lost a number of tremendous receivers the previous 2 years, they had recruited really well at receiver. And so I think you could make the case that Saban maybe took a more skeptical eye during the offseason, where Dabo might say he's so optimistic, and that's a major credit to him 95% of the time. But maybe Dabo would look at his receivers and go, "What are you talking about? We don't need look at these guys, 5-star, 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 high 4-star. What Jamison Williams? Who's that? What's he done?" Whereas Saban looked at his receiving corps and said, "I like my receivers, but we're a little deficient in speed. We need a little more speed." That addition was a masterstroke because Jamison Williams was not a proven commodity at Ohio State, and now what has he given them? Major game-breaking speed from the jump against Miami. He's their best receiver, and so maybe that's the sort of adjustment, I guess, is taking a harder look at yourself during the offseason. And I know, Dabo would probably just laugh at that and maybe justifiably so in saying, "Hey, man, we tear it down every year. We take a fine-tooth comb to every single thing every summer." They do that. So maybe that's not fair. But given what we've seen so far, it does stand to reason, like you just said. I mean, in hindsight, they should have gone and gotten, when you don't have a center, when you go into a season without a center, there's really no reason to have not at least taken a heavy look at the portal to get at least one offensive lineman.
Yeah. And the beauty is you don't have to be Florida State and try to get 15 transfers and take anybody with a shred of talent that you think can help you. You can do it Saban's way and be very particular about what it is very specifically. And here's the thing, though, like the Jameson Williams thing, if it didn't work out, it didn't work out. Like, nobody would be talking about that either. It wasn't like, if you take a quarterback and he implodes and everybody says, well, you took the wrong quarterback. Like, it would have been no big deal. And if Clemson had gone and gotten a center and it didn't work out, people would be saying, well, at least Dabo tried to get a center. We didn't really have another plan B here. And it would have been shrugged off, I think. So there's value in still approaching the transfer portal the same way he approaches recruiting. Like, best of the best, the guys who can help us, the guys who are going to fit our culture. Like, that all can still work. And look, again, you and I are Monday morning quarterbacking this whole thing without certainly knowing as much about it as Dabo does. But my critiques of what has happened this year are really less specific to say, well, why didn't they get a center, or why didn't they go get a veteran running back to sort of, bring some of the young guys along, or why didn't they get a slot receiver that could kind of be a sort of speed guy there in the middle of the field? Like, all of those things we can say with some level of understanding based on what we've seen. But the bigger issue for me is that I've yet to hear Dabo give a good explanation for why his answer is, well, we didn't need that. Like, his answers are very sort of deflective. And again, like rose-colored glasses, as opposed to, like, I think everybody would feel better about the coaching staff, the players, the situation, and the future if Dabo just said, we really did we spent some real time on the transfer portal. We kicked around a couple of guys. We just didn't think it was going to be the right fit. I was pretty convinced that we had an answer at XYZ. Like, to take it seriously, to take the critiques and questions seriously, as opposed to being dismissive of them, because that, whether he's actually dismissive or it's just an act, it comes off as Dabo is not appreciating genuine criticism here. Or
in the what people might want to hear category is, yeah, we're going to take a harder look at the portal moving forward, which I think they will. I predict they will. I'd be shocked if they do not start adding guys from the portal. Yeah. And again, it's just sort of like, this is, again, what I sort of said, it's both the great thing about Dabo and the frustrating thing is that he is just incapable of not being an optimist, of not putting a positive spin on things. And there are times, this is good relationship advice too, where the person that is upset doesn't want you to put a positive spin on it. They don't want answers and solutions. They just want you to commiserate. They just want you to say, yeah, I get it. It is pretty bad, huh? I'm sorry to hear that. Like, I think that's really sort of what the fan base wants more than anything, is to just, and to his credit, I think, as you said, this past week was more bluntly honest about the state of Clemson than I have ever heard him be, and saying, like, we stink right now. I think that people just want acknowledgement that, like, their frustrations are not misplaced. David, you are an expert on the absolute crumbling of once great football programs, having been having covered Florida State, and having, I think it was a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, you and Andrea Adelson did a tremendous expose on sort of the downfall of Jimbo Fisher and then the disaster of Willie Taggart. So you, more than anyone, are in position to sort of compare and contrast and to say, yep, these are some of the same cracks that Florida State showed when they were still going well, but things were headed south before anybody knew it. Yeah, this is kind of similar. Is there any validity to that in your mind as you evaluate or assess some of these doomsday folks out there who are saying, yep, this is the end, Dabo's never going to adapt, and therefore Clemson is done as an elite contender? I don't see a whole lot of commonality. I think if anything, it's probably a little more similar to, like,
early 2000s Florida State when Bowden was there, and the team was still fine, but not, and they were recruiting at a high level, and everybody was picking them in the top 10 every year, but the results weren't quite there. Maybe you run the risk of that, but even that was sort of like Bowden was sort of, I think, so disengaged at that point, and he had Bowden. Let's think about what happened there. Bowden was very sort of set in his ways and not super into being progressive at a time when the sport was changing a lot. He had Mickey Andrews was still his DC, and who was good. And he's hiring his son as the offensive coordinator, who was bad, and surrounding himself with a lot of people who he just knew and was comfortable with, as opposed to challenging himself. Bobby stopped trying to challenge Florida State in the early 2000s, and that's why they were a mediocre team. They were recruiting at an elite level and putting out mediocre performances. There is perhaps a risk of that, though I would say that 2005 Bobby Bowden and 2021 Dabo Swinney are not at all the same person. So I don't really think it's legitimate, but it's probably the better comparison. What's happened over the last 5 years at Florida State, I don't think Clemson is anywhere near that. Number one, the biggest problem at Florida State was a lack of sort of alignment between the president, the athletic department, the boosters, the coaching staff. I mean, it was all an absolute train wreck. You had a dozen different powers pulling in a dozen different directions. That is, to Dabo's credit, the one thing that I don't think will ever happen at Clemson, because he has such a strong approach to program building and all the stuff he talks about culture. That's exactly what this is about. It is about keeping everybody rowing in the same direction. And so I think that those risks aren't there. But again, it's sort of the challenge is, how do you stay true to what you believe in and who you are? And Florida State never, during the latter Jimbo years, never believed in anything. They were effectively nihilists. I mean, or they had a dozen people who believed in a dozen different things. Clemson has what they believe in. I think the challenge for them is more about how do you stay true to that while building on that foundation, as opposed to just saying, look at this great foundation we have, we'll always return back to this. There has to be other sort of branches from that tree. And I think that's probably where the comparison to the latter Bowden years is a little more reasonable than what you're looking at right now at Florida State.
In 2010, when they were having a losing season, Dabo kept saying, help is on the way. Things are about to get better. That was Sammy Watkins. And then Chad Morris was brought in to revitalize the offense. In 2014, there was Deshaun Watson sitting on the sideline who was hurt, and everybody knew that things were headed up. You didn't have to convince some fans or anybody of anything. What is there to be latched onto right now? Is it that maybe they'll go out and try to refresh the offense and bring in some new ideas? Is it just the maturing of an offensive line and more highly regarded offensive linemen who are sort of growing up right now? Is it DJ? Do you believe that he's going to be a superstar like Dabo says? That's a lot of questions, but I'm just curious, what is the basis for Clemson fans to believe right now that, okay, this is a minor dip and that things are going to be back to what we're used to pretty soon?
I don't think it is the same sort of story that it was in those previous years where you could say, here's the thing that we have coming forward. I think it's almost the opposite, in which, and this is really the argument that Dabo's made, is it's look at what we've done. Don't doubt that we won't get there again because we've done it. And there is something to be said for that. I mean, if the sun came up every day for all of eternity and then it didn't come up one day, you wouldn't be wrong to worry that it might not come up again tomorrow, but the math still suggests that it probably will. So, I think there is a genuine righteousness in him saying, have you seen what we have done for a decade now? Why would you think we're not going to do that again? It's the same people. We're just as smart as we always were. We're still recruiting elite talent. All that stuff is true. So I think it's sort of one of those things that it's it's almost like going to play blackjack in Vegas. You play the odds, right? And sometimes it's not going to work out, but the odds eventually, you're better off doing that than trying to throw caution to the wind and hit on 17. I am a buyer long-term on Clemson. I think you can buy low on the stock right now. Like, I think that's true. And they've got a really good quarterback recruited for next year if DJ doesn't work out, and the reports on him are phenomenal. I will say everyone that I have talked to behind the scenes is a big believer in DJ, and he says the right things, and he's working hard. And I worry about how much it's like sort of in his head. And we've seen quarterbacks that don't come back from that, but I don't think that's really the case. But they're still recruiting well. To me, I do think that at some point Dabo needs to sort of address some of the elephants in the room, whether it's the offensive line, whether it's the transfer portal, and some of those things need to be discussed. But I think that history would suggest that will happen. And when Dabo has sort of been pushed to a point where he had to make a change, he has done that, as you said, in the past. So to me, I don't know that there's this one thing like there had always been, whether it's Chad Morris or Brent Venables or Deshaun Watson. To me, the fact that he's always had those answers before leads me to believe that he will have them again.
You've got a work meeting that has started, right?
Yes. And if I don't get on that, well, what a shame that would be.
Hopefully it's not on camera.
I'd never put the camera on. I'm just there to show my face, but not really my face, just the image of my face that goes up on Zoom.
Dave, always a lot of fun talking to you. I really appreciate you sharing some of your valuable time with us, man.
It was my pleasure. I enjoyed our psychoanalysis. I hope you accept my insurance and let me know what my copay is.
Thanks, pal. Oh man, David Hale. I really think he should be a screenwriter or something for a sitcom. College football, lucky to have that guy for sure. Appreciate the support of our very loyal sponsors for helping make this happen. And most of all, thanks to all of you for hitting play every week. Everybody be safe. Have a great weekend. Cheers.